The year was 2003, and Maria Elena Morales stood at the corner of Pico and Western in Los Angeles, her weathered hands wrapping corn husks around masa, with the same precision her grandmother had taught her 50 years before in Oaxaca. The steam rising from her battered aluminum pot carried the scent of chile guajillo and pork shoulder slow-cooked for 12 hours. Pedestrians hurried past, most without a glance. Some wrinkled their noses. A few muttered comments she pretended not to. Here, illegal food, dirty. Probably got rats in that cart. What none of them could possibly imagine, what would have seemed like the fever dream of a desperate woman, was that this 62-year-old grandmother in a faded apron would, within 15 years, build a food empire worth over $40 million. An empire that would force 3 major American fast food chains to close locations. An empire that would make her name synonymous with authentic cuisine in a landscape dominated by corporate mediocrity. But before we witness one of the most stunning business transformations in modern American history, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what traditional food from your culture means to you. Because this story isn't just about tamales. It's about something far more powerful. Maria Elena didn't start as a street vendor by choice. She had been a respected cook in Oaxaca, running a small restaurant that had served 3 generations of families. Her tamales were legendary in her pueblo. People traveled hours for them, especially during Day of the Dead celebrations. The recipe was ancient, passed down through 7 generations of women in her family, each one adding their own wisdom to the technique. The masa was ground by hand on a metate. The lard was rendered from pigs raised by local farmers she knew by name, and the mole negro took 3 days to prepare, with over 30 ingredients including chocolate from cacao beans her family had grown. This wasn't food, this was living history, wrapped in corn husks. But when her husband died and her daughter in Los Angeles fell ill, Maria Elena did what countless mothers have done throughout human history. She left everything behind. At 62, she arrived in a country where she barely spoke the language, with $200, 1 suitcase, and a handwritten recipe book her grandmother had given her on her deathbed. These recipes are your power, her abuela had whispered. They carry the strength of all the women who came before you. Never forget that. For the first 2 months, Maria Elena worked as a dishwasher at a diner in Koreatown, sending every spare dollar to her daughter's medical bills. The restaurant owner, a man named Chuck Henderson, was the first to preview what Maria Elena would face in this new country. When she asked if she could bring tamales to share with the staff, a gesture of gratitude as was customary in her culture, Chuck laughed, a sharp bark, that made the other workers look up from their stations. "Listen, Maria," he said, pronouncing her name with exaggerated syllables. "We don't do that ethnic stuff here. This is an American kitchen. We serve American food to American people. You want to work here, you follow American rules." He pointed to the industrial dishwasher. "Your job is to clean, not to cook. Got it?" Maria Elena nodded quietly, but something shifted in her eyes, a flash of steel that Chuck Henderson was too self-absorbed to notice. That night, she made a decision. She would not hide her gift. She would not diminish herself to fit into someone else's narrow vision of what was acceptable. She would cook, and she would do it with the full force of her heritage behind her. The next day was her last at the diner. She left without explanation, and Chuck Henderson barely noticed. Maria Elena spent her savings on a used cart, a propane burner, and ingredients. That first morning at Pico and Western, she sold exactly 0 tamales. The second morning, a construction worker bought one out of pity, took a bite, and immediately returned to buy 6 more. By the end of the week, she had a small line. But she also had something else. Attention from people who didn't want her there. The first confrontation came from David Brennan, owner of Brennan's Burgers, a struggling fast food joint half a block away. David was a 3rd-generation restaurateur who had inherited the business from his father, along with a sense of entitlement and a dwindling customer base. He was 45, balding, perpetually red-faced, and deeply convinced that his failure to attract customers was someone else's fault. City regulations, changing demographics, anything but his own mediocre food and worse attitude. One Tuesday morning, David stormed over to Maria Elena's cart, his face already flushed with righteous indignation. "You got a permit for this?" he demanded, loud enough to make pedestrians stop and stare. Maria Elena looked up calmly. "Yes, senor. I have permits." "Bullshit. Let me see them." He grabbed at her permit clipboard, scanning it with obvious disappointment when he found everything in order. "Fine. But you're taking my customers. This is my territory. I've been here for 20 years. I have been here 1 week, senor, Maria Elena replied, her English careful but clear. Perhaps people are hungry for something different. The simplicity of the statement seemed to enrage David more than any insult could have. Different? You mean cheap? You mean inferior? You're undercutting legitimate businesses with your… He gestured at her cart with contempt. Your little ethnic project here. This is America. We have standards. A small crowd had gathered now, sensing drama. Maria Elena wiped her hands on her apron slowly, deliberately. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried clearly in the morning air. Senor, I understand you are worried about your business. This is natural, but I do not sell cheap food. I sell food made with love, with history, with the hands of my grandmother and her grandmother. Every tamale I make the same way my family has made for 200 years. This is not inferior. This is sacred. Sacred? David nearly choked on the word. Lady, you're selling food out of a cart on a street corner. That's not sacred, that's survival, and it's dragging down the whole neighborhood's property values. Something in his tone, the casual cruelty, the dismissive certainty, triggered something in Maria Elena. She had been dismissed before. She had been underestimated, ignored, patronized. But she had never been told that her grandmother's legacy was a threat to property values. Tell me, senor, she said, her voice taking on a different quality. Still gentle but with an edge like a well-sharpened knife hidden in velvet. How long is the line at your restaurant this morning? David blinked, thrown by the question. That's none of your… And how long is my… line? Even David couldn't deny what was visible to everyone watching. Maria Elena's cart had 7 people waiting. Brennan's Burgers, with its grease-stained windows and flickering neon sign, was completely empty. You can have permits, David said, his voice dropping to something mean and personal. But you'll never have respect. You'll always be the little Mexican lady with the cart. This is as good as it gets for you. He walked away and the crowd dispersed. But the encounter left something hanging in the air. Several people in line looked uncomfortable. One woman, clearly hesitant, stepped out of line. David Brennan might have lost the exchange, but his poison had worked on some level. Maria Elena took a long breath. Then she smiled at the next customer, wrapped their tamales with extra care, and included a small container of her homemade salsa roja, a gift, because that's what her grandmother would have done. But David Brennan was just the beginning. Over the next 3 months, Maria Elena faced a coordinated campaign of harassment that would have broken most people. Linda Shaw, the president of the local business association, showed up with a petition signed by 12 restaurant owners demanding Maria Elena's cart be banned from quality commercial districts. Linda was a former marketing executive who fancied herself a community leader, running the business association like her personal fiefdom. She arrived with a television news crew in tow, clearly expecting to score easy points by positioning herself as a defender of established businesses against unfair competition. Mrs. Morales, Linda began, her smile practiced and hollow. I'm sure you're a very nice woman, and your food is probably adequate for what it is, but you have to understand, businesses like yours create unfair advantages. You don't have the overhead costs, the employee requirements, the health inspections that legitimate restaurants face. It's not a level playing field. Maria Elena had been through 2 health inspections by this point. Both perfect scores. She produced the certificates quietly. Linda barely glanced at them. That's fine, but it's about more than paperwork. It's about the image of this neighborhood. When potential customers see street vendors, they think the area is declining. They worry about… She paused delicately. Quality control. Authenticity. Whether the food is really clean. The dog whistle was clear to everyone listening. The news camera was rolling, capturing Linda's carefully modulated concern, and capturing something else too. Behind Maria Elena, her regular customers were starting to gather, drawn by the commotion. Construction workers on their lunch break, office workers who had become addicted to her tamales de polo. A group of students from the nearby community college. Their faces told a different story than Linda Shaw's narrative. Miss Shaw, Maria Elena said, and there was something in her pronunciation of the name, perfectly polite, perfectly respectful, but somehow making it clear she saw through every layer of Linda's performance. I understand you are concerned about image, about authenticity, but I wonder, have you ever eaten at my cart? I don't need to eat your food to understand the economic impact. Perhaps you should. Maria Elena reached into her cart and pulled out a tamale, still steaming, wrapped perfectly in its corn husk. She held it out to Linda. Before you decide what is authentic, maybe you should taste what authentic means. It was a perfect trap, and Linda Shaw knew it. The camera was rolling. Refusing to taste the food would make her look like exactly what she was, a prejudiced gatekeeper hiding behind economic arguments. But accepting would mean potentially admitting that the food she was trying to ban was actually exceptional. Linda took the tamale. She unwrapped it with obvious reluctance, took the smallest possible bite, and something happened. Her expression changed. The practiced smile faltered. She took another bite, larger this time, involuntary. Then she looked at Maria Elena with something close to confusion. "This is," she started, then stopped. "This is really good. It is my great-great-great-grandmother's recipe," Maria Elena said simply. "Made exactly the same way since 1820. Does this taste like unfair competition to you? Or does it taste like something this neighborhood has been missing?" The news segment that aired that night didn't follow Linda Shaw's script. Instead, it featured Maria Elena's story, her perfect health scores, and a parade of customers, white, black, Latino, Asian, from every economic background, testifying that her tamales were the best food in the neighborhood. Linda Shaw's petition quietly disappeared. But the attacks didn't stop. They escalated. Robert Chen, the health inspector who arrived one morning, seemed like he might be different. He was professional, thorough, respectful in his manner. Maria Elena welcomed his inspection confidently. She had nothing to hide. Her station was immaculate, her food storage perfect, her temperature logs precise. But Robert had been sent with a purpose. Someone, and Maria Elena would never know if it was David Brennan or Linda Shaw or someone else entirely, had made a complaint about unsanitary conditions and possible food poisoning. Robert was under pressure to find something, anything, that would justify shutting her down. He spent 2 hours examining every inch of her operation. He checked temperatures. He reviewed her permits. He inspected her water source, her waste disposal, her hand-washing protocols. Maria Elena stood patiently throughout, answering every question, providing every document. Finally, Robert straightened up, closing his inspection clipboard. "Mrs. Morales, I have to be honest with you. I came here expecting to find violations. I was told I would find violations, but your operation is cleaner than most restaurants I inspect." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "It's actually cleaner than the place I ate at yesterday. A chain restaurant with a multi-million-dollar corporation behind it. You're doing everything right." Maria Elena smiled. "Thank you. This is how my grandmother taught me. Clean hands, clean heart, clean food." Robert hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Between you and me, someone is trying very hard to shut you down. They're going to keep calling in complaints, keep pressuring the yin department. You should be prepared for that." "I am prepared," Maria Elena said quietly. "I have been preparing my whole life for people who want to silence me because they fear what I represent." "What do you represent?" "The possibility that their way is not the only way, that something old can be more powerful than something new, that a grandmother with a cart can be better than their restaurants and their marketing and their focus groups." She gestured at the line already forming, even though it was barely 10 in the morning. "This is what terrifies them. Not my cart, not my permits, but that people choose me over them again and again, because what I offer is real." Robert Chen gave her a perfect inspection score, but he was right about one thing. The complaints kept coming. Every week, sometimes twice a week, a different inspector would arrive. Always the same result. Perfect scores. But each inspection disrupted her business, scared away some customers, cost her time and money. And then came Gregory Thornton. Gregory was different from David Brennan's sweaty desperation or Linda Shaw's passive-aggressive community politics. Gregory was a genuine restaurant mogul, owner of Thornton Restaurant Group, which operated 15 mid-scale dining establishments across Los Angeles. He had recently opened a Southwestern fusion concept 2 blocks from Maria Elena's corner, complete with celebrity chef branding and a $1 million marketing campaign. The restaurant was called Maze, a name that made Maria Elena wince when she first saw it. And it sold artisanal tamales for $12 each, compared to Maria Elena's $2.50. The tamales at Maze were made with imported cornmeal, prepared by culinary school graduates, and served on rustic wooden boards with microgreens and chipotle aioli. Gregory had even hired a food anthropologist to consult on authentic indigenous cooking techniques, which somehow resulted in tamales that bore almost no resemblance to anything actually served in Mexico. For the first month, Gregory ignored Maria Elena completely. But then his expensive market research started showing something disturbing. Customers were comparing Maze unfavorably to that lady with the cart. Food bloggers were writing that the $2 tamales were vastly superior to the $12 artisanal version. Yelp reviews specifically mentioned walking past Maze to get to Maria Elena's cart. Gregory showed up on a busy Friday lunch rush, dressed in an expensive suit, flanked by two people who were clearly lawyers or business managers. He didn't yell like David, he didn't play political games like Linda. Instead, he positioned himself directly in front of Maria Elena's cart, blocking her customers' access, and pulled out a folder of documents. "Mrs. Morales," he began, his voice smooth and cold. "My name is Gregory Thornton. I own Thornton Restaurant Group. I'm here to make you an offer that I think you'll find very generous." Maria Elena continued wrapping tamales, not looking up. "I am not interested in selling, senor. You haven't heard the offer yet. $50,000 cash for your recipes and your agreement to cease operations within a 3-mile radius of any Thornton property. That's more money than you'll make in 5 years of standing out here in the sun." Now Maria Elena looked up. "My recipes are not for sale." Gregory's smile thinned. "Mrs. Morales, let me be very clear about the reality of your situation. You're operating a small, unscalable business with no intellectual property protection, no brand recognition beyond this immediate area, and no pathway to growth. Meanwhile, I have the resources to replicate what you do, market it to a much wider audience, and do it with professional polish. I'm offering you this money out of respect for what you've built, but with or without your cooperation, there will be high-quality tamales with the Thornton name on them. The only question is whether you profit from that or get swept aside by it." The line of customers behind Gregory had gone completely silent. Some were recording on their phones. Others just stared, shocked at the naked hostility masked in business language. Maria Elena set down her ladle very carefully. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet that people leaned forward to hear. "Senor Thornton, you speak about respect, but you do not know what that word means. You speak about quality, but you have never tasted my food. You speak about replication, but you cannot replicate what makes these tamales sacred." She paused, letting the word hang in the air. "You think you can buy my grandmother's hands? My mother's prayers? The weight of 200 years of women who kept this recipe alive through revolution and poverty and migration? You think $50,000 is what this is worth?" "Mrs. Morales, I understand you're emotional about this." "I am not emotional," Maria Elena interrupted, her voice sharp for the first time. "I am clear. You come here with your lawyers and your money and your 3-mile radius, and you think you understand power. But you do not. You understand transactions, you understand market share, you understand branding, but you do not understand why people stand in this line for 30 minutes in the heat when your air-conditioned restaurant is 2 blocks away." Gregory's expression hardened. "Enlighten me then. Why do they?" "Because they can taste the difference between food made for profit and food made for love. Because they know that I wake up at 4 in the morning to prepare this masa by hand, and that your cooks follow a laminated recipe card clipped to the wall. Because when they bite into my tamale, they taste not just corn and pork and chili, but the history of a people who have been dismissed and diminished and told they are not good enough, just like you are telling me now, and who survived anyway, with their dignity intact." The Fioninti crowd erupted in spontaneous applause. Gregory Thornton looked around, seemingly surprised that he had lost control of the moment. His face flushed, and his professional demeanor cracked. "You know what this is?" he said, his voice rising. "This is a sentimental fantasy. You're a street vendor playing dress-up with grandmothers and heritage and history, but at the end of the day you're just selling tamales from a cart. I have 15 restaurants. I have 50 employees. I have relationships with every food critic in this city. I can make sure that every health inspector, every city council person, every commercial property owner knows that you're an obstacle to legitimate business development. You want to talk about history? I'll bury you in it." The threat was explicit now. The mask fully dropped. And something remarkable happened. One of Maria Elena's regular customers, a man named James Patterson, who worked as a construction foreman and had been buying tamales every lunch for 3 months, stepped forward. He was a large man, muscular and weathered, and when he spoke, his voice carried authority. "Hey, fancy suit," James said. "You threatening this lady?" Gregory turned, annoyed at the interruption. "This is a business discussion. It doesn't concern you." "It concerns me plenty. I eat here every day. This lady makes the best food in the neighborhood. Probably the best food I've ever eaten, and I've been to your restaurant, by the way. That fusion garbage you serve? It's an insult to real food. So if you're going to stand here and threaten her, you're going to have to go through all of us." And just like that, the entire line of customers moved forward, creating a physical barrier between Gregory and Maria Elena. 20 people from every background, forming a silent wall of solidarity. Gregory Thornton looked at the crowd, at his lawyers who were signaling that this was getting out of hand, at Maria Elena who stood calm and dignified behind her cart. He pointed at her, his finger shaking slightly. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You think these people will protect you? Where will they be when the city pulls your permits? When the landlord who owns this corner decides he wants you gone? Where will they be when I open a tamale cart on this exact corner with my own employees, undercutting your prices? You've made an enemy of the wrong person." He left, but the words hung in the air like poison. Several customers looked worried. They had just witnessed not a victory, but the beginning of a war that Maria Elena seemed destined to lose. That night, Maria Elena barely slept. For the first time since starting her cart, she felt the weight of real fear. Gregory Thornton had resources she couldn't match, connections she didn't have, the ability to follow through on every threat he'd made. But she also remembered something her grandmother had told her, decades ago in Oaxaca, when Maria Elena was a young woman facing her own moment of doubt. "Mija," her abuela had said, "the powerful always think they can crush us because we are small, but they forget that we are many. They forget that we have something they can never buy or steal or replicate. We have faith, we have community, and we have the knowledge that our ancestors have survived worse than this, and their recipes, their songs, their stories survived with them. You carry that survival in your hands every time you cook. Never forget that you are not alone. Every woman who came before you is standing at your shoulder." The next morning, Maria Elena was back at her corner at 5 a.m., preparing her masa. But something had changed. Word had spread about Gregory Thornton's threats, and when she opened for business, she found something unexpected. A line that stretched around the block. Over 100 people, many of them clutching printed sheets of paper. James Patterson, the construction foreman, was at the front. He handed Maria Elena one of the sheets. It was a petition, signed by over 300 people, demanding that the city protect her right to operate. But more than that, it was a petition to support what they called authentic cultural businesses against corporate harassment. "We heard what happened yesterday," James said. "A bunch of us got together last night. We're not letting them push you out." Maria Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. There was work to do. For the next 2 weeks, Gregory Thornton made good on his threats. Health inspectors came daily. The property owner was pressured to raise her daily operating fee to an absurd level. A rival cart did appear 50 feet away, operated by Thornton employees selling artisanal tamales for $2, matching Maria Elena's price but with the backing of a corporate operation. But none of it worked. The health inspectors kept giving her perfect scores, often apologizing for having to come back so frequently. The community raised money to help with the increased operating fees. And the rival cart sat empty while Maria Elena's line grew longer. Then came the revelation that changed everything. It started with a food critic named Jennifer Wu, who wrote for the Los Angeles Times. Jennifer had been following Maria Elena's story, intrigued by the grassroots support and the corporate opposition. She came to the cart one afternoon, ordered 4 different types of tamales, and spent an hour eating them slowly, taking notes. The review that appeared 3 days later was unlike anything typically published in the Times food section. Jennifer didn't just review the food, though she described the tamales in rapturous detail, calling them the most authentic and expertly crafted tamales available in Los Angeles, period. She told Maria Elena's story. She detailed the harassment. She named Gregory Thornton and his attempt to shut down a superior competitor. And she ended with a call to action. If you care about authentic food, about supporting real artisans over corporate mimicry, about preserving culinary heritage against the steamroller of bland commercialization, get yourself to the corner of Pico and Western immediately. The review went viral. Within 48 hours, Maria Elena's cart was an international story. Food websites picked it up. The Instagram food community mobilized. Celebrities started showing up. Musicians, actors, athletes, all posting photos of themselves at Maria Elena's cart, holding tamales, with captions about authenticity and cultural appreciation. But the real turning point came when someone started digging into Gregory Thornton's background. It turned out that Gregory's grandfather had been a Mexican immigrant named Gregorio Torontegui, who had changed his name to sound more American, and built his restaurant empire by explicitly avoiding Mexican food, viewing it as unmarketable to mainstream audiences. Gregory had grown up ashamed of his heritage, building his identity as a white restaurateur, even as he appropriated indigenous cooking techniques for profit. When this was reported, the backlash was immediate and brutal. Thornton Restaurant Group's stock price dropped. Mays, his Southwest fusion concept, became a symbol of cultural appropriation. Protesters appeared outside his restaurants, and Gregory Thornton, for the first time in his privileged life, faced a mirror that showed him exactly what he had become. He appeared at Maria Elena's cart on a rainy Tuesday morning, alone. No lawyers, no suit. He was wearing jeans and the old jacket, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. The line of customers parted warily as he approached, some pulling out phones, expecting another confrontation. "Mrs. Morales," he said, and his voice was completely different, smaller, uncertain, stripped of all arrogance. "I need to tell you something." Maria Elena looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I was wrong," Gregory continued. "About everything. About you. About what you're doing. About what matters. I spent my whole life running from where I came from, and I built an empire on nothing. On fakery. On stealing culture and packaging it for people who don't know the difference. And when you came along, with the real thing, with actual heritage and skill and soul, it terrified me. Because you exposed what I really am. A fraud. A man so ashamed of his own grandfather that he tried to destroy a woman who reminded him of what he'd lost. The silence was absolute. Customers who had been hostile moments before now watched with something like fascination. Maria Elena spoke quietly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know that you were right. About everything you said. And I want to ask..." His voice broke slightly. "If you would teach me, not your recipes. I would never ask for your recipes, but teach me how to respect where I came from. How to honor it instead of exploiting it. How to make food that means something instead of food that just makes money." It was perhaps the most stunning reversal anyone present had ever witnessed. Gregory Thornton, the corporate restaurateur, admitting not just defeat, but moral bankruptcy. Maria Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something no one expected. She pulled out a tamale, one of her special mole negro tamales, the ones she only made on Saturdays, using the recipe that took 3 days to prepare. She unwrapped it carefully and held it out to him. "Eat this," she said. Gregory took it with shaking hands. He bit into it, and something happened to his face, a crack in whatever wall he'd built around himself. Tears started rolling down his cheeks. "This tastes like..." He struggled to speak. "Like my childhood. Like my grandmother's house. I had forgotten. I made myself forget." "That is what you have been fighting," Maria Elena said gently. "Not me. Yourself. The part of you that remembered but was too afraid to honor." She paused, then made a decision. That silenced the crowd. "Come to my home this Saturday," she said. 4 in the morning. I will show you how to make mole negro the way my grandmother taught me. Not to steal. Not to sell. To remember. To honor. To make peace with who you are." Gregory Thornton, this powerful man who had threatened her, who had tried to destroy her, stood weeping in front of her cart, nodding. "But there is a condition," Maria Elena added. "Close Mays. Do not steal culture for profit anymore. If you want to, serve Mexican food. Do it with honesty. Hire Mexican cooks and pay them well. Study the real history, not the version your focus groups prefer. Give credit, share power, and when you make mistakes, because you will, listen to the people who correct you." "I will," Gregory said. "I promise. I'll close Mays this week, and I'll..." He looked around at the watching crowd, then back at Maria Elena. "I'll use my platform to tell your story. The real story. About what authentic food means. About the people who preserve it. About why it matters." He kept his word. Mays closed within 5 days. Gregory Thornton gave an interview to the LA Times, where he didn't just apologize but explained the deeper issues of cultural appropriation, corporate exploitation, and his own journey from shame to attempted reconciliation. He started a foundation to support immigrant food entrepreneurs, with Maria Elena as the first board member. And on that Saturday morning, Gregory Thornton did show up at Maria Elena's home at 4 a.m. She taught him how to toast chiles properly, how to grind chocolate by hand, how to taste for balance. He was a terrible student at first, clumsy, impatient, too used to shortcuts. But he listened. He learned. And over the months that followed, something in him began to heal. But Maria Elena's story didn't end with Gregory's redemption. It was just beginning. The publicity from the confrontation had attracted attention from investors, media companies, and food industry. executives. But Maria Elena turned down every corporate offer. Instead, she did something smarter. She started teaching. Every weekend she held classes in traditional Oaxacan cooking, open to anyone who wanted to learn. She charged on a sliding scale, whatever people could afford, from nothing to hundreds of dollars. Professional chefs came, struggling immigrants came, food writers and culinary students and grandmothers who wanted to reconnect with traditions they'd lost. And then she did something revolutionary. She organized the street vendors. Maria Elena reached out to every taco truck, tamale cart, fruit vendor, and street food operator in Los Angeles. She helped them navigate permit processes, connected them with pro bono lawyers, taught them food safety protocols that would protect them from bad faith inspections. She created a collective bargaining organization, the Alliance of Traditional Food Vendors, that gave them power in numbers. Within 2 years, the alliance had 300 members. They negotiated for designated vending zones, streamlined permit processes, and protection from predatory enforcement. Maria Elena became a spokesperson for immigrant entrepreneurs, testifying before city council, appearing at community forums, her quiet authority making politicians and business leaders listen. And her own business expanded, not into a corporate chain, but into something more organic and powerful. She opened a small restaurant, then a second. Both operated on profit-sharing models with her employees. She launched a line of prepared mole sauces, with profits going to support culinary education in Oaxaca. She wrote a cookbook that became a bestseller, with recipes and stories from 7 generations of her family. By 2018, 15 years after that first morning at Pico and Western, Maria Elena's combined businesses were valued at over $40 million. 3 fast food chains had closed locations in Los Angeles, unable to compete with the renaissance of authentic street food that Maria Elena had ignited. Her face appeared on magazine covers. She was invited to the White House. Culinary schools offered her honorary degrees. But she still spent 3 mornings a week at that original cart on Pico and Western, making tamales by hand, talking with customers, remembering where she'd started. One morning, a young woman approached, nervous, clutching a small portfolio. She was from El Salvador, just arrived, with dreams of selling pupusas, but no idea how to navigate the system. Maria Elena looked at her and saw herself 15 years before, frightened, determined, carrying generations of knowledge and no map for how to share it with this new country. "Sit down, mija," Maria Elena said. "Tell me your story. Tell me your grandmother's recipes. And then I will tell you how we turn that into power." Because that's what Maria Elena Morales had discovered, through all the mockery and harassment and corporate threats. Her grandmother had been right. The recipes weren't just food. They were power. The power of heritage, of community, of women who refuse to be diminished. The power of knowing that what you carry in your hands is more valuable than anything that can be bought or sold or replicated by focus groups. She had turned every insult into fire. She had built an empire from corn husks and ancestral knowledge. She had transformed not just her own life but the entire landscape of food in her city, proving that authenticity will always triumph over appropriation, that humility is stronger than arrogance, and that the grandmother with a cart can change the world if she refuses to accept anyone else's limitations. Today, when culinary students ask Maria Elena what the secret to her success was, she always gives the same answer. There is no secret. There is only truth. Truth in the food, truth in the struggle, truth in who you are and where you come from. When you stand in that truth, with dignity and grace, the world has only 2 choices: change to meet you or reveal its own emptiness by opposing you. Either way, you win. Because you never abandoned yourself. You never apologized for your gifts. You never let someone else's fear determine your worth. And then she hands them a tamale, made exactly the way her grandmother taught her, and says, "Now taste this, and tell me what your grandmother taught you to make." Because that is where your power lives. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their heritage, their skills, their grandmother's recipes are not obstacles to overcome but weapons to wield. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people who changed the world by refusing to be ordinary. Drop a comment telling me, what tradition from your culture are you fighting to preserve? What did your grandmother teach you that the world told you didn't matter? Because Maria Elena's story is not unique. It's happening right now. In every city, in every immigrant community, wherever people carry knowledge that corporations can't replicate and courage that money can't buy. The only question is, will you recognize it when you see it? Will you stand in that line even when the restaurant with air conditioning is closer? Will you choose authenticity over convenience, heritage over marketing, soul over polish? That choice, my friends, is how empires fall and new worlds are born, one tamale at a time.